It's great to welcome back to the program today Congressman Ro Khanna, representing California's 17th district, which includes Silicon Valley, joining us today from a car. Very much great to have you back on.
David, a parked car, always
Of
good to
course,
do
always
to
safe.
be on.
Okay, supply chain shortages, gas prices, uh, tchotchkes from China that are expected to be Christmas gifts. You know, there's this broad range of what does milk cost, what do toys cost, etc. Initially,
Right.
there was the idea that this is a demand resurgence after there was a demand evaporation during the pandemic. It's now pretty clear that it's more than that. But what's your kind of general assessment of what we're seeing right now?
Well, we're seeing inflation, and this is why we need two things. We need to pass Build Back Better, which would put more money in the pockets of working families so that they can pay for their groceries and gas. It would lower prescription drug prices. It would deal with some of the supply chain issues by investing money in our ports, by providing an incentive for people to return to work. And so we need to pass it. And then the Fed, as Larry Summers has said, the Fed needs to make sure that they stop, in my view, the mortgage buybacks and stop increasing the money supply. That's largely on the Fed, and they can take that action.
Let's pick one item, which is gas prices, because it gets so much attention. You know, for years, I have not participated in the you either blame or praise the president for what's going on with gas prices. I mean, my best assessment is if a president wants, they can tap into the strategic reserve, which will eventually lower gas prices, maybe 18 to 20 cents a gallon on what might be a temporary basis. I mean, it seems really that presidents don't have very much to do with gas prices, but yet it's a very popular political football to throw around, isn't it?
Well, this president, I think, did the right thing by tapping the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. 18 cents per gallon is significant. I mean, that means a lot to folks who are struggling. But in terms of dramatically lowering prices, it has more to do with the oil companies. I mean, they didn't when oil was 22, $30 a barrel, they didn't invest. Now that it's much higher, they want to reap the benefits, and so the long-term solution to this is price stability, which is more electric vehicles, more renewable energy, so that we're not at the mercy of the vagaries of the price of oil. But in the short term, I think President Biden's taking the right action.
When we look at some other things, like for example, used cars have been a big area of price increase, starting with the pandemic and continuing through. Building materials is another one, although it seems that lumber is sort of coming back down. How involved do you believe a government should be on individual areas like these in trying to influence price?
As involved as we can be. I mean, we have to be realistic that the governments usually don't have that many tools to fight inflation. I mean, it goes back to Gerald Ford with WIN and whip inflation, and it's very hard to do. But we should do what we can. In this case, I think the three things we need to do is put more money in the pockets of working families so that they have money to deal with the higher prices. Make sure we're dealing with supply chain issues at the ports, and make sure we're incentivizing more people to work so that you can deal with some of these supply issues and lower prices. I guess I'd add one more thing, which is if there's concentrated industry, making sure people aren't charging prices above the competitive price, and putting pressure on those industries to charge a fair price.
I guess we would call it plausible. Maybe we don't have to say probable yet that Republicans may well take control of the House of Representatives back next year and would assume control in January of 2023. Given that we don't know, at least, what will happen after next November, what do you believe realistically can get done in terms of major legislation in the next year that would pass not only the House but actually the Senate and become law?
Well, first of all, we need to make sure we win, or it's devastating for our democracy. I mean, to have people like Marjorie Taylor Greene and others in charge of the House of Representatives is a fate that really no one in my view, and the Democratic side should want and should take very seriously. I think we have to obviously we have to pass Build Back Better, which will lower prescription drug costs, lower child care costs, lower elder care costs. We need to, in my view, deliver on the $15 minimum wage. The president can unilaterally forgive student loans. He ought to do that, have some forgiveness of student loans. Voting rights, we have to deliver voting rights. This is our chance to do it, or we're basically stuck with state voter suppression laws. And we need to make sure that we're tackling immigration. I mean, if it doesn't make it into Build Back Better, there has to be some delivering on immigration. So those would be some of the things I think that are the priorities for next year.
On student loans, I get a lot of emails from people who say, I'm really mad that Joe Biden is not moving more quickly on forgiving some student loan debt. I came into this presidency not believing that Joe Biden had any intention of doing that. I'm not praising or saying I'm mad at him. I just never thought that this was a priority for Joe Biden. I didn't think he was going to forgive any student debt. Is that your view, or do you think that that's something he might be able to be pressured to do?
I think you should be persuaded to do it. I think it can help really build support in with him with young people around the country, and it's the right thing to do. And he understands that we're being married to the first lady, who is an educator, how much debt we're saddling the younger generation with. Now, I don't think he's going to do 50,000 as Senator Warren, Senator Schumer, and I and others have asked. But could he do 10, 20,000? And would that materially make a difference in people's lives? Absolutely. And I think it would be one of the biggest things he could do to build momentum for his presidency.
You mentioned Marjorie Taylor Greene. As some in my audience know, the House voted to strip her of her committee assignments some months ago. Your colleague, Ayanna Pressley, has now proposed doing the same with Lauren Boebert over her multiple recent videos related to stories about being in elevators with Ilhan Omar and the Jihad Squad, etc. What's your view about doing that? Because it's obviously correct on the merits, and I would go further that these folks have no business even being in the House of Representatives. But is it not a Pyrrhic victory in some sense, where they end up saying, I've been canceled, donate money, and it gives them attention?
Well, David, you're actually right. I was talking to a friend of mine on the Republican side yesterday, and he said, when are you going to kick me off my committee so I can go raise $1 million and send out an email to my list? So this is why I think the speaker is being judicious about this, discussing it. Obviously, we have to take action. It has to be clear that that kind of racism, that kind of Islamophobia has no place. But we don't want to make Representative Boebert a martyr and do something that's going to further fuel her platform. And that's why I think the speaker's taking her time consulting the caucus. I will support whatever action she ends up taking. We do need to take some action.
Sometimes we learn that there are interesting political bedfellows behind the scenes where publicly there's a lot of conflict and they're friends behind the scenes. Right now, with some of these personalities that exist, for example, this rift between Congresswoman Boebert and Ilhan Omar, is there more palpable tension behind the scenes where it is not nearly as collegial as it tends to be?
I think on some of the fringes, yes, there are a few people who probably you don't interact with, you don't even sometimes say hi to, but not among the vast majority. I mean, I still have good relations on the other side. I speak often to Representative Comer. We disagree strongly on issues of oil and gas, other issues, but he's always engages in good faith. There are, dozens of members on the other side who I still work with. You have to get legislation through.
I want to talk a little bit about the general approach that you think the Democratic Party should take going into the 2022 election. One of the things that makes it increasingly tough to run against the kind of modern Republicans of the Trump and post-Trump era is, for the most part, they're not even pretending to be about policy anymore. They're about obstruction. They're about cultural issues like critical race theory, or a Christmas tree was burned and it's part of the war on Christmas, or whatever the case may be. So that's very silly, but it also makes it sort of tough to run against them, because if they're not arguing on policy, it's hard to fight against things like the left wants to turn this country into a socialist country, or these kind of vague statements. So how do you run against that? I'm not convinced that just continuing to talk about policy like a train it actually is what's effective.
Well, we lead with patriotism. We talk about how we have an aspirational vision for America. We have a vision of an America where we actually win the 21st century. We're proud of being Americans. Everyone should be taught to be proud of being Americans. And what we want to make sure is people shouldn't have to be forced to leave their hometowns. We need to bring prosperity and modern opportunity to places that have long been left out, so that they can have dignity, so they can stay, kids can stay with their families, and that Trump promised all these things, but he hasn't delivered. And we will to build a strong, vibrant, great America. I think we don't emphasize the patriotism enough, the aspiration enough. You have to get to people's hearts to get them to think, yeah, they really have a vision, that they care about this country, they care about my community. And then you can get into the specifics, but you can't lead with the specifics without what is the end, what is the purpose. Human beings aren't just economic actors.
Yeah, that's what seems extraordinarily difficult about the situation, which is I feel very strongly that when there is a policy debate, we win the policy debate very clearly. But if the circumstances don't allow you to be speaking to a public that is expecting to have the policy debate, and instead they want the debate over who is socialist or patriotic or whatever the case may be, it feels like a losing battle in some sense.
Well, we can win that debate, that our values are the true American values, our values of the freedom of ideas and expression, of a respect for people of all faiths, of a respect for community, of a civility, a decency. These are the American values that we're standing up for, and the fulfillment of those values, and of spreading opportunity and prosperity. I think we ought to frame them as we're standing up for the deepest American values, the fundamental American values, and not that here's our 5-point plan just to put more money in your pocket. That matters, but people care holistically. They want to see our nation thrive and succeed, and they want to know what their place is in this nation. And we have to speak to that deeper aspiration that people have, and people are very much vote on identity.
Before I let you go, I'm curious now in thinking about 2022. Of course, every member of the House is up for re-election, many in very safe seats. So the number of truly contested seats is, of course, only a fraction of the total. 1/3 of the Senate is of course up. There's a number of governors' races, et cetera. How much talk behind the scenes is there about the role that the former president, Donald Trump, is going to try to play, either in general in the midterms or in specific races? And does it really matter in terms of the strategy for Democrats?
I do think he's going to play a role. He's already playing a role in Georgia, challenging an incumbent governor. He's challenging some sitting House members. I think it provides an opportunity for Democrats to, when the Republican Party is so divided and they're still having people who are denying Joe Biden's legitimate election running for office on that platform. But I don't think it's sufficient for Democrats. I think it gives us an opportunity to compete, to not be written off, to maintain our majority. But we have to have a vision that delivers for people and that convinces them that we really are speaking to what matters to them, and matters to them not just economically, matters to their conception of our country. And only if we do that can we keep the House.
Do you think the Virginia gubernatorial from last month was a warning about making it too much about running against Trumpism? Because Youngkin seemed to kind of ride the fence well enough that it was not a good strategy.
Yeah, I don't think it should be all about Trump. I think it could be also about some of the extremes in Congress who basically said, look, do you want some of these people to be chairing the next committees and to be in charge of the new Congress? But then I think it has to be a clear vision on our side of what we have delivered and what we're going to continue to deliver, what we stand for. People ultimately need the positive, the affirmative to vote for someone.
Yeah, the more I look at next year, the more I'm of the mindset of hope for the best and prepare for the worst, and hopefully it works out not too poorly. Congressman Ro Khanna, representing California's 17th District, always appreciate your time.
Thank you, David. I always enjoy being on.